forward the substance of what's come out of the outreach, the good outreach. But it's not enough to do good outreach. Once you get people involved, you have to listen to them and you have to incorporate what people are telling you into your housing element. This draft of the housing element should already have a policy on farm worker housing. And this stuff about it being regional and countywide is just rationalization. Within the city of Salinas, farm worker housing is an urgency. We are in crisis. And for anyone to say that you're not going to, it's not in the draft housing element because it's a regional problem, I think is just putting up excuses. I'm sorely disappointed in that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I am Rocio Tafoya from CCA Youth for Change. I'm 17 years old and I work in the fields. My mom is a single mother and she is raising 8 kids. She can't afford a house to rent, so we are renting a room for all of us. What I am here for and what I want to ask for is affordable houses. Houses where family workers can live. Salinas is full of many Latino farm workers that all they do is work for their kids for a bright future. I would also like to see houses for undocumented people like my family and friends. We all work for a better city to get in a home, but we want you now to help us. We want the response from this council. This is what I want from this council, to get on our shoes and vote for housing for farm workers and undocumented people. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. My name is Joel Hernandez. I'm also from the Center for Community Advocacy, also known as CCA. So I'm here today to speak on 2 things. The first one is to talk about the code enforcement that's also integrated into one of the 5 top priorities that PHC, and then is also implemented on the housing element. So with the new hiring of 3 new code enforcement personnel, which is will be doubling the staff, it's always good to know that there's more staff and that there's more services that which will be provided, which is always great. My recommendation is that there's a committee or a group of residents, and they can be CCA leaders with code enforcement staff that can meet quarterly to talk about some of the situations that happen in our city. And some of those meetings can be an hour or 2, but to talk about services, community engagement, but most important, to talk about some of the collateral damage that some of the residents go through when people are being displaced from their homes and how to minimize that situation. A perfect example of working with community and city staff is what we're doing with the Chief of Police and the Costa Plaza residents right now with the new community policing. We're meeting together to kind of strategize and build a relationship on what community policing looks like in their community. So that's a great example of what community leaders can do with city staff to kind of make sure that that keeps moving forward. Secondly, I'm here to talk about the 5 elements of support that building healthy communities and CCA are supporting. And mainly because farm worker housing, we hear a lot of these stories about, we have a shortage of farm workers in the Central Valley. Well, think about that. A lot of people are not coming to Salinas and to work on the field because there's no housing, there's no appropriate housing. It's not, some of it has to do with drought and other stuff, but it's affordable housing. It's expensive, so I'm asking you to support that and to kind of, let's get moving on this affordable housing for farm workers and undocumented. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Alfred Diaz-Infante. I'm president and CEO of Chispa, a local nonprofit affordable housing development company that's built over 2,300 units. We started in 1980 building farm worker housing. It's interesting to hear that 35 years later we're still talking about farm worker housing. I want to thank staff for the committee engagement, the outreach. I've been attending city council meetings and board of supervisors meetings regarding housing elements for the last 20 years or so. And I have to say this is probably the most inclusive process that I've ever seen. So one, I want to thank you and your staff for that. But the fact remains that You know, Salinas, if you drive around, we have a large farm worker community, and the need continues. There was a study that was done by the county. It's probably about 10 years, maybe 10 years old or more, and that assessed the housing needs and health needs of farm workers. It's time to do it again. I think it's time, and hopefully the city can work collaboratively with the county and other cities to really get a much better understanding of the needs of farm workers, because you know, this is still a farm worker community. We still have agriculture as #1, so I strongly encourage you to include farm worker housing in your housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Jeanette Pantoja from Building Healthy Communities. I just want to respond to the dialogue from the last couple of minutes. Our request to have the city do a study on the needs of farm workers was a compromise from our part in response to, well, following our initial request to have the city have done a more thorough analysis of the farm worker housing needs in what is currently the draft housing element. We had provided staff with information provided from HCD on where they could find additional information to supplement their analysis without needing to pay $150,000 to do this extensive study. Having said that, the BHC Housing Work Group is grateful to staff for providing a receptive and collaborative housing planning process. They've always been quick to respond to our questions and our comments. What I do want to say is that housing here in Salinas is a crisis, just like it is across the country. It's getting harder and harder for people to find affordable, decent housing. Cities must focus now more than ever at developing creative and effective solutions to these tough issues. The draft housing element contains many strong policies and actions, some of which will require strong engagement and support by this council, such as the development of a strong inclusionary housing ordinance, the revamping of the city's code enforcement strategy done with the community, a housing voucher anti-discrimination ordinance, and as articulated in our letter, a closer look at farm worker housing, not just to study it, but to actually develop and implement solutions. BHC will continue to be engaged in the implementation of this plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the enthusiasm of our young friends, but we slow the meeting down and we may have to cut off some of the speakers, so we'd like to thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Carmen Gill, representing the Monterey County Health Department. So I will be taking everything I heard back today to my superiors. I wanted to share with you a brief that we recently put together at the Health Department that really details the housing issue and the housing crisis throughout Monterey County. I have given to Patty so she can share with you. It really is a data that backs up the need for affordable, low-income farm worker housing here in our county, and I really want you to take a look at it. It was created by the Health and Health Policy Salinas Committee in partnership with many organizations and as well as community members. You'll see some real-life stories in there as well, and we hope that it's a useful tool that informs your decision-making going forward and that others can also utilize as they move their work around housing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off to say affordable is really not affordable. It's called low, extreme income. That's what everyone's looking for. Low income, when you say affordable, everyone has to make 1.5 times rent to 2.5 times rent, which you guys may not have to deal with, but residents here in this community do feel that, and it's a real need. Not only is that, I want to address, I can't see your name all the way over there, but Miss, there's 1,551 units in Monterey County that have been built. In 2009 to 2014, Santa Cruz County had 672 units that they made their target, and they built actually 800. While you guys provide great quality, the research has been great here, the need is forever, it's really needed. And we're asking for the council to really focus in on housing needs for everyone. I'm here today actually advocating on people who are developmentally disabled. Those individuals have a really hard time finding housing. One, because they're unable to get to certain areas, they have certain accommodations, and funding is not available for them. We need funding, like you mentioned before, sir, that there is funding here. However, it's where you prioritize that. So instead of the mayor on his phone, I would hope you hear us out. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Brian Finnegan. I'm speaking on behalf of the Future Growth Area owners. We've heard a lot today about the great outreach program that was carried on for the housing element, and it was, and I would have thought that the Future Growth Area, as the provider of most of the new housing in the community for the housing element period, and a priority project in your list of priorities would have been included as a stakeholder, but we were not. The issue that I've raised in my letter has to do with the minimum 30 dwelling units per acre requirement that's in the housing element, and that has amazing consequences, both good and bad, not only for the future growth area, but for all of the community where it's applied. And the response to the comments that we made is just kicking that issue down the road. And just from a standpoint of fairness, you need to keep in mind that the city's taking credit for all those places that are zoned 30 units minimum per acre for your arena obligation. And it's only fair that the people who get saddled with the responsibility of building that 30 units per acre product, minimum 30 units per acre product, would get inclusionary credit for it. I urge you not to kick that issue down the road, but let's sit down and deal with it. I noticed that the BHC raised the issue of how the minimum 30 units per acre is going to be implemented throughout the city. They raised that in their comment letter. It's not just a concern in the future growth area, it's a concern for the whole city. Thank you very much.
Jim?
I also thank you, council members, for hearing this particular issue. I also wanted to echo the importance of farm worker housing. We are, it's not just a crisis. I mean, it's right now, it's an emergency when it comes to farm worker housing. We recently, the planning commission for the county was recently looking at some farm worker housing for TNA, and there was just such a pushback from community of Spreckles regarding that farm worker housing, who were saying, hey, stick them in Salinas, go put them over there, you know, we don't want them over here. Where are they going to shop? Where do you shop? You know, these are the same people who pick our crops. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry area for agriculture. We need to step up, and we need to stop sticking our head in the sand on this particular issue. We've got people living in dire situations in garages, as somebody on the planning commission said, in caves, which is true, living under bridges, living homeless. We do need to step up, and I agree with Councilwoman when it comes to some of the areas such as PG. Are they doing their part as well? Salinas seems to be housing, you know, it's as if everybody go over there while we do the flight and we go over to 68 and beyond. But at the same time, you know, so I think somebody just said to me that, you know, agriculture should be putting some money into this in order to provide that. So how much is too much? How much is the right amount? Is it per crate? Is it 10 cents? Is it 5 cents? Is it a cent? Can they afford half a cent to put in such an industry as this in order to accommodate the housing? Anyway, I ask that you really take into consider the farm workers who are really the backbone of the community. And I would like to see probably more farm worker murals going down the freeway, carrying the crates on those big posters that we have, as opposed to the farmers on their tractors. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. My name is Ina Mata. I'm a couple leader and a member at Christian Communities Church. I'm a mother of 3 children, a wife of a field worker. My family and I immigrated to this country with the dream of having a better life. When we arrived to Salinas, My family and I face a poor reality of not being able to find a place to live. My sister helped us by squeezing us into her house. It was very uncomfortable because there were only 2 bedrooms for more than 8 people. We could only stay for 2 weeks, and after that, we looked for an apartment in our house, and we searched for newspapers in the laundry listings, but no one was willing to rent us a room because we did not have any documents to prove our legal status or social security number. We were finally able to rent a bedroom that my children, my husband, and I had to share. We had to pay $100 a month, but we had to share the kitchen, the bathroom, and the living room with many other people, and there was no privacy. Then we heard about the housing resources, but in order to receive help, we had to join the waiting list and wait for our time. Meanwhile, we managed to rent a garage where the housing conditions were worse because we had no heater, no kitchen, or bathroom. And we were so desperate, we decided to go and stay in our car. So our next choice was to rent a motel room. So we spent the 9 months of our job, and we had to pay $1,050 a month. So we had to leave the motel because our children did not accept them because we had no housing proof. So they didn't consider the motel address a real address. So finally we were able to rent a house and share. Sorry, but
Thank you,
I'm
ma'am.
asking to consider that I want the housing element to recognize the needs for undocumented and farm workers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, miembros del Consejo de Salinas. Mi nombre es Elsa Ortega y soy líder de Copa y miembro de la Iglesia Santa María. Soy madre de 4 niños y mi esposo y yo somos trabajadores del campo. Yo comencé rentando un apartamento de 2 recámaras para mí y mis 4 hijos. Tuvieron un cuarto para ellos solos y para que pudieran estudiar mejor, pero para eso mi esposo y yo tuvimos que trabajar y descuidar a los niños. El costo de la renta del primer año fue de $875 por mes y las condiciones del apartamento eran bastante mal, incluso había cucarachas y paredes descascaradas, y eso afecta la salud de mis hijos. Al siguiente año, el dueño nos subió la renta a $995 por mes y por cada reparación necesaria al apartamento nosotros teníamos que pagarlo. A causa de que la renta era muy cara, mi esposo tuvo que buscar un trabajo de todo el año y de tiempo completo. Nos vimos obligados a rentar un cuarto para ayudarnos con los gastos del apartamento. Mis hijos empezaron a bajar las calificaciones y a tener mala conducta en la escuela. A causa de mi esposo, a causa de que mi esposo y yo nos vimos obligados y yo trabajábamos más de 12 horas todos los días y abandonábamos a nuestros hijos. Yo hacía el mayor esfuerzo de ayudar a mis hijos con la tarea, pero me era imposible porque llegaba a casa muy cansada y de mal humor. Después de recibir quejas de la escuela de mis hijos, tomé la decisión de parar de trabajar para ponerle atención y ayudarlos con su tarea y a participar en la escuela. Desde entonces mis hijos empezaron a mejorar sus calificaciones y hasta ahora son estudiantes del mes. El sacrificio de dejar de trabajar causó que mis hijos no tuvieran su propia recámara para estudiar y descansar decentemente, porque el precio de la renta del apartamento es demasiado caro para una familia del campo que no gana suficiente dinero para proveer algo mejor a su familia. Hoy quiero pedirles que por favor escuchen nuestras necesidades y nos ayuden para que construyan casas y apartamentos de bajo costo y para personas del campo sin documentos y en especial para ayudar a nuestros jóvenes.
Gracias, señora,
que
su
no caigan en
tiempo
las manos
terminado.
de delincuencia.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council members. My name is Silvia Rodriguez, Copa leader from Sacred Heart Church, and I am going to translate to English what Celsa just said. My name is Celsa Ortega, and I am a COPA leader and a member of St. Mary's of Nativity Church. I am a mother of 4 children, and my husband and I are farm workers. I started to rent a 2-bedroom apartment so my 4 children could have their own room, so they could develop and study better. That meant that my husband and I had to work and not be able to take care of our children. The first year, our rent was $875 per month, and the apartment conditions were quite bad. We had cockroaches and ceiling walls, and that was affecting the health of my children. The following year, the owner increased our rent to $995 per month. Plus, we had to pay out of our own pocket for any repairs that were needed. Due to the expensive rent fee we were paying, my husband had to find a year-round full-time job, and we were forced to rent a room to help pay for our expenses. My children's grades began to drop and have behavior problems in school due to my husband and I working more than 12 hours every day. We were leaving our children alone for too long. After work, I made my greatest effort to help my children with their homework, but it was very difficult. I could not help them because when I came home, I was very tired and not in a good mood. After receiving various complaints from my children's school, I decided to stop working in order to pay more attention to them, help them with their homework, and participate in their school activities. Since then, my children's grades started to improve, and now they are even the student of the month. Leaving my job was a great sacrifice and caused my 4 children to no longer have their own bedroom where they could study and rest. Rents are too high for field-working families who don't make enough money and provide something better for their families. Today, I want to ask you to please listen to our needs and help us build low-income houses or apartments for undocumented field-working families. And this will especially help our youth and have a better development and not end up in the hands of crime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last 4 people in line will be the last 4 speakers. So step right up and let's.
Thank you for taking the time. My name is Carolina Roman, and I'm COPA leader from Secret Card. And today I'm going to talk behind my friend because she couldn't be here today. After I graduated from college, I thought my dream was accomplished because I was already married with a kid, with a child, and had purchased my own house. This dream didn't last long. As the economy started going down and I lost my house, I tried loan modification, short sale, but all this didn't work. Within 6 months, the process of my house was foreclosure. After this, we started struggling with a place to rent. I have noticed that the rent in Salinas keep increasing. Our family is growing, and as we search for a 3-bedroom apartment, we have noticed that the price in Salinas are very high, ranging from $1,250 to $1,500 monthly. This is not only for apartment, where our kids wouldn't even have a backyard and enough space for them. If we want to rent a house, this is the price we have found already even higher, ranging from $1,700 to $1,900 for a 3-bedroom house. I believe the rental prices are very high considering our cost of living in Salinas and our salaries. Not to mention that we are not considered low income but medium income, and we believe that there should be more control over the rent expenses or a little more help for families like us and hardworking to have a housing more accessible. We have looking to buy a house but have had no luck as market prices are also increasing and my income is not enough to qualify for a market value house since my husband's income is not considered due to his legal status. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for being part of this very collaborative process. I have 3 words for you. You already got a lot of other words and comments, so I want to keep it very brief. Money, partnership, and leadership. We're not going to get to our housing goals if we don't have the funds in place to make it happen. Leveraging state, federal, private investment, but we have to pony up as well here locally. Partnership. Asking the property owners to do their fair share, whether it's the building community, whether it's folks that pay taxes here, own here, I own my own home, many of you own your own home. We have to do more than our fair share as the investment community here. We have to step forward and participate. Leadership. You heard from a lot of folks today. We're hoping and expecting leadership here on the dais on several issues. Farm worker housing. This is Salinas. We don't need to talk too much about that. We need action. We need a plan of action. We need to make progress on that. We look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Mayor and council members, my name is Joni Relis. I'm the Housing Program Manager for the Housing Authority in the County of Monterey. Affordable housing is at a crisis. Right now, I have families that have vouchers where we can pay 70% of their income towards rent. They can't find units. The rents are so high, and they waited for 7 years to get this voucher, and now, because of the lack of units, their vouchers are expiring, and they would have to go back on the wait list. I'm talking about affordable housing for everyone. I'm also, we also need permanent supportive housing. HUD looks at the Housing First model of putting people that are homeless into an apartment, into a place so that they get the supportive services that they desperately need in order to keep that apartment and to stay housed. We would spend less money putting people in apartments first than spending money for police services, fire services, hospital services, social services. All those services come out way more than what it would cost to put someone in an apartment. Regarding the need of here in Salinas, we're getting ready to open our wait list next month for the voucher program. We've been closed since 2008. So everyone that applied 7 years ago have gone through the list and we're now ready to reopen. We anticipate, in 2008, we had 5,000, roughly 5,000 that applied. With the crisis now of affordable housing, we're looking at double that number of people applying next month. So that tells you that 10,000 to 12,000 people that are extremely low income or low income need a place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
In dealing with no rent controls in Marina, a young man named Devontae Taylor was displaced after 22 years. I brought him over to the housing authority. The discipline coordinator didn't hear about his story and didn't listen to us, and they're homeless now. And dealing with farm workers and dealing with everyone else, Councilwoman Luke says it's not where we live, but how we live, that we focus on. And if we are the community, the farm workers bend over, they have to deal with pesticides. The people deal with dangerous situations, and having stability helps our manifestos change. Who is the community? Who are the stakeholders? Statistics dealing with mental health, dealing with discrimination, dealing with bias, dealing with poverty, end up in jail, in prison, and generation after generation is in trauma. So Councilwoman Lutz and Councilwoman De La Rosa created the language for housing element, but it has to include who we really are and where we come from, so that when we are able to have funding, that the constituents that elected you, you don't have to talk for it. That you engage with them, and with the women that are vulnerable, that can be violated, with unfair working conditions, with people that we see that put food on our plate. What is the value of human life? Now, I know that the All-American City knows that there was immigrants before there was immigrants. And now we have a community, we have the opportunity to make that language inclusive, not where we work, but who that we are for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now close this portion of the hearing, and we're going to go back to council members for their comments. So I will go to my right. Councilwoman De La Rosa.
Well, hearing the community speak and being a service provider and with my other hat as working for the Monterey County Health Department, it can be very emotional for a lot of us that are providing those services to our community when we hear these stories. And I know for a fact that they're very, very real. And yes, we don't have enough housing. But when we talk about farm workers, yes, that should have been a priority for us. And farm workers, they're the ones that put the food on our table, like you said. And what we have in our community right now, increasing rents that it's unbelievable. If I own property in Salinas right now, I can rent a 2-bedroom apartment infested with roaches. And this family comes and rents this $950 a month. And guess what? They rent it like that. They rent those deplorable conditions because they have nowhere else to go. And it's really, really sad that here we live in this beautiful city, this beautiful county, and we have no housing to provide for these families and children. And the undocumented, there's stories, and we heard them tonight. We try to send them to the agencies. Thank you, Alfred, for being here, your comments, Chispa. I always tell the community, when you're in Chispa, when you're with the Housing Authority, take care of your living situation. Because do you know how many other people are standing in line to get into Chispa, to get into the Housing Authority? So again, I will support the recommendations that building healthy communities, and I want to thank Mr. Uranga, CCA, for being here tonight, for their comments, the rest of the community. But it's a great need, and we need to move forward, and we need to make the right decisions on the policies that we need to make. And I want to thank Matt. Matt, thank you. Copa, thank you for being here. And yeah, I'm a little emotional because I see those families. I see, yeah.
Councilmember Barrera, comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The words from Mr. Alfred Diaz-Infante that he's been in this business for 35 years and he's still hearing about farm worker housing, and we still have the same problems. And I believe we're going to be talking about it another 35 years. This meeting reminded me of a meeting a few years ago remember when the Supercenter Walmart was coming to town? I think that was one of our hardest meetings. I know it was for me. We had the unions on the right, we had the ag people on the left. I was educated that day that Walmart on the national level buys $345 million of Salinas Valley product. Think about that. $345 million. What's interesting was usually when somebody calls me for a meeting, I get the secretary of the secretary to set up the appointment. That night, I had presidents and owners, corporate leaders. I hate that word leaders, by the way. We use it loosely. We're all leaders here. I was surprised that on my phone, I had corporate presidents, very wealthy people from the Salinas Valley calling me on this one issue. That was the only time they've ever called me on this. Always my phone started blowing up like this when it comes to farm working house. Mr. Mayor, you said something at the beginning of this meeting on this topic. You and the city manager have been working diligently on this issue. Man, if you really are a $4 billion industry, what would it cost the ag company? Because we are a farm working. I know we have a former mayor that wanted to make it Silicon Valley. Come on, we're a farm working community. And I didn't hear any charity cases tonight. I heard testimony from hardworking people. I heard a mom that said, you know what, my husband and I were hard workers, but I had to leave my job because I was getting complaints from school, and my 4 children are more important. How awesome is that? Well, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager, you have a chair at that table that I probably don't have access to. Hit them up for a penny a box. Every box that comes out of the Salinas Valley, I mean, Walmart's buying $345 million. Other companies, I'm not a world traveler, but one time I went to New York. It just happened to be one of those, I was excited. I saw letters from Salinas Valley, Sister Joe Lutz. I had to call my mom down in Southern California. Mom, guess where I'm at? She couldn't believe it. But you know what? On the serious note, Mr. Mayor, can a $4 billion industry afford 1 penny a box to build this farm worker housing? And I believe they can. You know what it takes? That word that I don't like. It takes leadership from this group here. But you know what happens? It just depends where our interests are at. Where I live, in the neighborhood that I live, on the 2 sides, my neighbors, hardworking people. I can tell you one thing that, and I don't want to talk code enforcement, I would know what my address is, but it is an unhealthy place to live. You know why? Because they got 16 to 17 people living in one house. And they all get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to go to work. None of them are a charity case. They're all hardworking, but they can't afford decent housing. It's a serious thing. So Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, and I'm your buddy on this one, I challenge you that we do talk to these people. A penny a box for farm worker housing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Craig?
Thank you. I won't continue down the same path as Councilman Barrera or De La Rosa. I think they made very good points. I do want to acknowledge Brian Finnegan in the future growth area. I think when you're talking about affordable housing, and the future growth area is responsible for 11,000 homes that will be built in the north side of town, they certainly deserve a place at the table in that discussion. So I would just note they did have apprehension in the inclusionary ordinance credit for minimum of 30 dwelling units per acre, and also the feasibility of the inclusionary housing program, specifically the 30 minimum density issue. So just to be on record and note that I would like for staff to engage the future growth area with some discussion on that, because I think that's a fair assessment, especially for the amount of housing that they are building. So, thank you.
Councilwoman Lutz?
Thank you, Mayor. What is perhaps very beneficial to the city of Salinas is that I think it was either in May or June that the California Supreme Court made its decision regarding the California Building Association versus the city of San Jose. And they upheld the right of a city to apply inclusionary housing ordinances, to impose inclusionary housing ordinances for affordable housing requirements. And that's really the best thing that could have happened, because we could have had the court case gone the other way. We could have been without the tools that we need to impose those affordable housing requirements on the future growth area. So we're in a wonderful position as we're in a time of growth that we can actually look to the future growth area to start providing those, looking at the inclusionary housing ordinances, looking at matrices that we can put together. Because, and Tony, you're absolutely right about the farm worker housing, and everyone who spoke, we do need to deal with that. But remember too, that low-income housing is also for the service industry workers, the healthcare providers, anybody making less than $36,000 a year. We've got to provide housing for everyone. And I appreciate the woman forgotten her name, the second to last woman that spoke, that said, you know, providing that housing is what's going to save us a lot of money on other services. So there's no question that the nation is in an affordable housing crisis. And I think staff and the City of Salinas and all the people here, the partnerships that we've developed, are really looking pretty aggressively at this problem. And I appreciate everybody here, staff, community, council, everybody working hard to say, we really want to address this problem. It's not something that we don't want to look at, it's something that we want to take head on. The only hesitation I would have, or something that we want to just be thinking about, is that when we look at places like, I'm going to pick on my favorite place, Tiny Village, inclusionary housing, yes, but the bottom row is empty, and the front first story. And what happens is we have to be careful because we don't want to build those food deserts. When people move into inclusionary housing, they want to have the services available. And so to have people to move into Tiny Village, but to buy a diaper or a gallon of milk, you have to get into a car and drive there, just drives me crazy. I think that we need to look very holistically at the type of housing we're going to build, but this is the opportunity, and we are right at the cusp, I think, of being able to do some really great things. The economy is improving. California Supreme Court upheld the city's right to provide that inclusionary housing, and we've got a community that, as Matt said, is working together in partnership. So this is the time is now, we can get things done. Thank you, staff, thank you, community. This is great, thank you.
Jennifer, I had a chance to reference Exhibit 3, and I see that you did a good job to respond to BHC's points. Jeanette should be complimented for her work, and she's nimble. And in fact, I made copies of the BHC feedback on the element. They're in the back if you want to just glance through them, because I think they speak to a few things, and even the commentary we heard today, bigger, better outreach. This process was more inclusive than ever. It's a blueprint, and it's a blueprint that's going to go a number of years. It's required by the state. Sabino's around here someplace. We used to sit on the County Housing Advisory Committee at one point, going through the same process for the county. I think what we're seeing, though, what we're hearing is what will only get worse. If you have any friends or family that live in San Jose, or especially in San Francisco, if you think rents are bad here, they're only going to get worse. And this blueprint, as it is, and it's well put together, and the work that's gone into it is thorough, we see surface, just a lot of strain on the system. And so, what does the city do? Sure, we can support Mid-Penn or South County housing in Chispa, but ultimately, I think this situation is going to get worse rapidly. I remember when I first moved to Salinas and was able to buy into the housing, something like 80% were being bought by people that lived in Silicon Valley. We're making a commute, and I think we'll continue to see more and more of that. That'll only grow. To the comment that Councilman Craig made for future growth area, I agree. It's one of our major priorities. It can't move fast enough. If you talk to developers that are brave enough to invest in the private sector to help inventory, it's a big undertaking, and the city doesn't go through it all that often, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at. And to our friends from the county and the housing authorities, I know I participated with Simon Salinas in a forum that dealt with trying to get the folks that are in the Housing Choice Voucher program to that can offer the property to folks that qualify. That needs to be looked at as well. There's so many takeaways we hear from the audience because it's the truth. The amount that people are paying is more than it's ever been, certainly as a percent of their disposable income, so to speak. So, I'm going to support what's been the case of a lot of work that went into this. But I would also say to the mayor and to both Councilwoman De La Rosa and Councilwoman Lutz, you've played a leadership role for a long time in housing for the council. I don't even know when our last meeting was of the housing committee. Maybe it's been a few months. Okay, so I think keeping that going and getting it moving more, and I'll pledge myself to help as necessary. So that's all. Thank you.
I think before we go any further, if one of the things I would like to see us add as we go forward, there's a there was a letter from Building Healthy Communities dated August the 17th. And one thing that's in here, it says, will contribute a share of funding to participate in a special countywide study that requires scientific community survey and/or survey of, go to page 2 here. Had it on my phone, but I lost it. Agriculture, employers in the county to further define housing needs of farm labor, workforce, financing constraints and opportunities and best practices by 2017. And I think we need to up the ante on that a little bit and say by the end of 2016 we do that. We don't wait that extra year. So I would like to see that added so that we can step up and start addressing that issue on top of everything else we got going on.
Mayor, I'd like to move approval with your
Second.
Councilmember Barrera.
Aye.
Councilmember Craig.
Aye.
Councilmember De La Rosa.
Aye.
Councilmember Booth.
Aye.
Councilmember McShane.
Yes.
Mayor Gunter.
Aye. Thank everyone for their participation in that item. We appreciate your input. The next item will be item number 15214, loan agreement between the City of Salinas and some of the farm housing number MPTWH Incorporated. We'll hear a report from the interim community development director, Alex Snow.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. And here we have an opportunity to support housing that's going to be, that is proposed and is hopefully going to be coming in the ground in the not too distant future. This is a loan agreement with Mid-Penn Housing. They're a very experienced housing provider up and down the Bay Area, both Bay Areas, Monterey Bay Area and San Francisco Bay Area. And this is a proposal for a loan to allow Mid-Penn to move forward with its pre-development plan and move forward so that we can get to the point with this development so that it is shovel ready and we're able to move forward with permanent financing. This involves 8 parcels that were actually acquired by the Salinas Redevelopment Agency using housing funds. So this is in the heart of Chinatown. The street to the far right is Lake Street, just above where you see the outline of the parcels, the red outline, is Soledad Street, and it stretches about half of the block along Soledad Street. To the bottom of the street is the Buddhist temple campus. And so this is about 0.8 acres. Again, it's a lot of different parcels that were acquired by the redevelopment agencies. Where you see the community garden at the far right of the site is where the Chinatown community garden is located. So again, it's 8 different parcels, each parcel less than 4,000 square feet. That's the way they were developed back then. Completely undevelopable on their own, so the former redevelopment agency undertook the opportunity to acquire parcels over about a 6 or 7 year period. The lots are zoned for MX, which is mixed use. It allows a very wide variety of development at a fairly high intensity. This pre-development loan, again, would allow Mid-Penn to move forward with its pre-development expenses. It would be $201,500 at 0% interest and provided in 2 parts as funding becomes available. Most of it in 2015, but then there will be additional funds available in 2016. And then looking ahead to when the project receives permanent construction financing, this loan would be rolled over into that permanent financing loan. So developer performance, we're expecting Mid-Penn to move forward very quickly to complete their studies, to have a community meeting so that they can share their findings and a preliminary plan with the community. And then within 9 months, submit for planning entitlements and a financing plan. And then by December 31st, 2016, have their land use approvals and be ready to move forward for financing. At this point, if Representative, there she is, Betsy, if Betsy has a little presentation on what Mid-Penn does and what they have in mind for this property.
Hi, good evening. I'm Betsy Wilson with Mid-Penn Housing. I just have 4 slides and I'll try to be brief. The first one's just a little bit about Mid-Penn. I've been in front of you before, but you'll bear with me here. So Mid-Penn is a nonprofit affordable housing developer. We've been around since 1970. I oversee our office in Watsonville. On my team, sitting over there is Luis Preciado, who's the project manager in charge of this proposed project. He's a resident of Salinas. We're both really passionate about this proposal that we have here for this community in Chinatown. Mid-Penn has 3 affiliated corporations, our real estate development group, which Luis and I work with, property and asset management, we self-manage all of our properties, and then a resident services corporation, which invests over $5 million annually and works with hundreds of other service providers to deliver specific services to our residents as the property needs. So in this case, this is really a supportive housing project, and we're proposing very intensive services here that will include both a robust case management program as well as a 24-hour security desk that will help folks who are hopefully coming off the streets into this housing remain stable and successful in that housing. Just quickly about the property. So we're going to be working on an entitlement package that we believe will contain 90 units, mostly small studios, in a 4-story building. That's 1 story of parking and retail or commercial space over 3 stories of residential housing. The image at the bottom is just sort of showing the scale of the building in the neighborhood. We're working on the elevation, so I'm not really flashing an elevation up there because we're trying to refine that. We don't really have that final look yet, but this kind of gives you a sense of the basic scale. The building, even though it will look different than this, will be roughly this tall. We'll have a substantial amount of residential community space, as well as a large amount of street fronting retail, which we're going to be working very hard at the front end to identify the users and occupants of that. Probably mostly community serving nonprofits. Okay, and then just quickly about the loan, this is the budget. The majority of the money is going to be spent on design work, architecture, landscape, engineering, as well as the required studies for under CEQA. And we'll also have some market study funding in there, which will allow us to pursue financing at the tail end. Once we're entitled, we'll be applying for the financing we need to build it, and we'll be required to do market studies at that point. Quickly on the schedule, typically we see entitlements take 9 to 12 months. After that, we'll apply for financing. That can take 1 year to 2 years to put it all together. So we'll be doing finance, we'll be entitling through into 2016. We'll be financing through into 2017, and then hopefully we'll be also breaking ground in 2017, and it'll take more than 1 year to finish the project. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. We'll go down to the council members for questions. Councilwoman Lutz, any questions? Councilmember McShane. I'll go to my right. Councilwoman Craig. Councilmember Barrera, you're up, sir.
When you say small studios, what's the square footage, Mr.
Roughly 350 square feet.
Thank you. Mr. Stump, and it looks beautiful, and I'm sure you have a legacy of buildings, and sometimes your projects takes anywhere from 50 to 20 years for fruition, and I think this was going to be a little bit less. But what are we doing with, at one end you're going to have this beautiful development, and at the other end we have this issue, homeless issue that we haven't been able to deal with. And here at this complex, it says you're gonna have case management, service providers, programs, nutrition. But yet we're having a difficult time doing it with the population that is out there right now. How do you see this beautiful development and then 200 campsites out there?
I guess the short answer is we don't necessarily. I think there are some changes that need to happen to the neighborhood over that time period, or this development is not going to get financed because the financiers, the banks, whoever is going to loan, the tax credit investors and so on who are going to loan on this property are certainly going to look at the neighborhood and they're going to say, if they see the conditions that are there now, I don't think we're going to get financing for it. And that's something that we've talked with Mid-Penn about, and we have to have a strategy to address that. That said, this is permanent supportive housing. This is the kind of housing that HUD is looking for. This is the kind of housing that can get people off of the street and into decent, affordable housing.
And I agree with you, Mr. Stump. So we've been talking about strategy on this problem. I mean, Chinatown is the worst than I've ever seen it. So when you're bringing in these bankers and these people that are going to lend you money, what are we going to do, clean it up for a day and then, who's responsible for that strategy here? Is there somebody up here in the front that's responsible for that strategy?
I'm not pointing to anybody.
Just look at it and
I think that it's something that every department needs to be a part of, and every the entire city organization. If we want to see this affordable housing project move forward, we do have to come up with some permanent solutions to the Soledad Street area.
So, Mr. Stump, you're asking us to approve this, but I guess my concern is, and I know you're capable of, you've been good at what you do, but my concern is that these strategies have not worked with this problem here. And so there's a concern. I don't know, Mr. Corpus would like to say something on that.
Well, Mr. Barrera and council members, we've been working diligently with the county who provides funding for the homeless situations. And I think they're taking a look specifically at program services. That's not an ability that the city can provide, but as a designated homeless public agency for this county, the county is stepping forward, looking at the Santa Cruz model, which we introduced. That's the Downtown Accountability Program. They're also looking at a housing coordinator that might be jointly funded with the city. In the meantime, there's a health and safety issue. As you know, Lake Alley was a problem. We took that back and cleaned that up. We're now working property by property. We have some resources, thanks to you and the rest of the council, in providing additional crew and resources in order for us to be able to do that. So we have a private contractor under the supervision of Public Works that are going not just once in a while, but on a daily schedule to these encampments in and around the city. So in order to address some of the issues that a lender might have or other people might have in terms of looking at Chinatown, it's going to take a while because it's been neglected for some time. We didn't have all the resources. It's multi-departmental, multidisciplinary in terms of the approach. So we're trying to get as many partners and the city family, if you will, of services, whether they're from Mr. Stump's department, Public Works, or police, are all applying different ways and creative ways to really stretch their imagination and creativity to look at, one, cleanup of the area, and two, providing some services. And so that will take some time, but we, I think, are started on a very good few steps with the county and with the Homeless Coalition.
Thank you, Mr. Corpus. But Mr. Stump, and I know you mentioned your